Now let's take a look at building the small spikes along the head and tail. So if we take a look at our artwork, you can see we have these sort of small little spikes going along the tail and then some along the head as well. So we want to be able to build those, and we don't necessarily want to build them all at different. We don't want to build them all separately, basically. So in Cinema 4D, we have some really powerful tools to be able to place geometry like this and then convert it to polygons afterwards. So one thing we can do is to go ahead and build an individual spike, and we'll do that using our spline. So we'll go ahead and just go into our side view here. You could use a cylinder as well if you wanted to, but I'm going to go ahead and use a spline. And so let's go ahead and just draw out from the base here, and I'll just give it a little bit of a curve. All right, so maybe not that much. Okay, and then let's go ahead and get a circle. Okay, and right now the circle's pretty big, so let's go ahead and start with just a decreased size on our circle. Let's drop in a sweep NURBS, and we'll drop the circle and the spline in. Okay, and let's go ahead and change the plane of the circle. And then in the sweep, let's go ahead and change the in scale down to something a bit smaller. Okay, and we can take a look at our resulting piece here. All right, now if we want it to be a little bit narrower, we can go ahead and change this to an ellipse. Let's change our second radius here. And now we can go ahead and take these values down, and we want to go ahead and take the radius y down, and you can make it a little bit more flattened. Okay, now the cap, we come in here under caps, and so we can discern whether that's the start. So this is going to actually be the end, so we'll use a fillet cap. We'll turn on constrain so it doesn't change the size. Let's go ahead and take the radius down a little bit, increase the number of steps, so we get something that is a little bit smoother. So again, we're just working with parametric objects here. We've got the splines and the sweep NURBS. I'm going to go ahead and take the circle, and I don't want so much geometry there. So let's go ahead and turn that to uniform. I'll take this all the way down so it's a little bit lower resolution for us. Okay, so we'll call this our spike. So now we want to be able to place these along the tail and the head. So we'll do the tail, and then I'll let you do the head on your own. But we want to be able to get a spline that fits along the body to use for the tail and the head. So what we can do is go ahead and let's turn off our symmetry and hyper NURBS for a moment. Let's go ahead and grab the line right along here. Okay, and let me go ahead and take this geometry down just a little. Or actually bring this up a little. And let's bring this down just to kind of clean things up a little bit. But we can actually take this edge and use it to create a spline. So probably want to clean this up a little bit. So again, double click on your edge. Then we'll go under mesh and go under commands, edge to spline. You'll see there's now a spline underneath the geometry, so we'll go ahead and pull that out. So that's now our body spline. Now we only need a portion of this. Right now it's linear. I'm going to go ahead and change that to cubic, and let's set the intermediate points. And we can start to get rid of the some of the points that we don't need. So let me go ahead and turn off the body. So we can figure out what parts of this we need. So I'm going to go ahead and select this point here, right click, break segment. Okay. And and we want to make sure that we have this close spline off. So you can see now there's a gap right there. We also don't need it to come all the way up here, so let's go ahead and break that. Okay, let's go down to the back here, and we'll break it right here. Okay, we need it to go down to the end of the tail, but we don't need it to go much further than that, so we'll go down here, break that segment. Okay, so now we have this spline that we need and this one that we need. Everything else we don't need. So what we can do is go ahead and select the spline, and let's actually go to Mesh Spline, and we'll go to Explode Segments. So now we have each piece is one segment, so we can go in here and select the segments that we don't want and just delete those. So you can see we need that one, so everything else we should be able to get rid of. Okay, so now we're left with these two splines. We can drag these out, and so we can call this something like tail spline and head spline. So I'm going to do it again on the tail, and then you just do the same thing, exactly the same thing on the head. So we want to actually create our little spikes along this spline. So there are a number of ways to do that. One of the ways is to go ahead and just grab a cloner under MoGraph. That's going to clone whatever object we drop underneath it, which in this case is going to be our spike. So let's go ahead and drop our spike underneath it. So you can see now it's created some copies of that spike. We can go into our cloner, change the number. So change the number of clones, and you can see that it's actually moving those in the Y. Okay, so what we want to do is actually add an effector to this that will allow it to create these splines, or these spikes along our spline. So we want to go ahead and add an effector, spline effector. Okay, and I have the cloner selected, so it's showing up here. Otherwise, you can drop it in there. And then in our spline effector, under the effector, you'll see an area for spline. This is where we want to drop in our tail spline. So we'll go ahead and click and drag the tail spline in there. And now you can see that the spline is now driving what the clones are. So let me go ahead and turn the body back on. Okay. And now we can go into our cloner and into our spline effector to change things up a little bit. So we can increase the number of these, and we start to rotate this around. We want to go into our spline effector, jump in under parameter, and you can see the spline is affecting the position, and then also we can affect the rotation. Okay, so if I turn that rotation off, you can see they snap up. If I turn it on, you can see that I can drive and change the rotation in here, and I can change that rotation to be off a little bit if I want, or I can just turn that off. Okay, so let's go ahead back into our cloner, and let's increase the number under object. Let's go ahead and increase that number. We can also take our spline, our tail spline, we can modify that spline if we want to. So we could take that point, move it up here a little bit more, and then that spline is going to go a little bit further up. Now I also want the scale to change a little bit. So let's go ahead and use a step effector. So let's go ahead under effectors. We'll drop in a step effector. So you can see by default, if we go into that step effector under parameter, the scale is set, and you can see that it's scaling those up as it goes. I actually want to scale them down a little bit, so I'll take that scale down a little. Now at this point we can still, because of the power of our hierarchy type workflow, we can still go in and modify the underlying spike here. So if we wanted to come in our sweep, we could just grab that sweep, come in under the details, and we could start to modify the shape of each one of those spikes. So maybe make it a little bit narrower at the base. Maybe add a point in there, coming in like that. Maybe make it a little bit narrower, and then come back into our cloner and maybe increase the count a little bit. Okay. We could take our circle and decrease that a little bit to make them a bit thinner, and then dial that in here. I also want to add a little bit of randomness to this. So there's another effector for that. We'll go ahead and grab a random effector. You can see it's already affecting this. If I grab random, go to parameter, that's where we tell it what parameters we want the randomness to affect. Okay, so we don't want it to affect really the Y movement, and I really don't want it to affect too much of the movement at all. I want it really to affect a little bit more of the scale. I'll choose a uniform scale. That'll give me a little bit more of a kind of a random scale to it. And then if you want to turn on rotation, you can add a little bit of randomness to the rotation of these as well. Again, that just kind of adds a little bit more realism to it. Okay, so again, you just want to build up your spike, and you can use it. You can use a polygon cylinder straight away, a primitive if you want, or we can use this and convert to polygon after. So really, as I said, polygon workflows in here, you're talking about the ability to get to polygons through a number of different methods, and this is one of those methods. Okay, so build up your single spike, drop it under a cloner, and then you want to extract that spline from your polygon object. Use that spline after you split it apart as part of the spline effector that's driving into this cloner. So you can see we have spline effector, step, and random effectors that are all affecting how these are placed. Okay, and so once we're done, we can go ahead, and if you want to just grab a null, we can grab all of these and just organize it under this null so that we can see these a little bit better. Okay, and then you just want to do the same thing on the head going up here. Okay, once we have that done, the next thing we'll do is we'll create a little bit of a different look up here on these spikes coming forward, a little bit more of kind of a fleshy or hair kind of a look. So we'll go ahead and do that in the next lesson.